Can we know our own minds? In this video, I'm going to examine some questions about the accuracy of introspection, our ability to look inward, as it were, and examine our immediate mental states. Many philosophers endorse some sort of epistemic privilege thesis for introspection. This is the claim that introspection is more reliable than other ways of knowing, such as perception, or we can be more confident about beliefs formed on the basis of introspection. Introspective beliefs are less open to doubt, or introspection is a process less prone to error. The basic thought here is that people have some sort of privileged access to their own mental states, and this allows them to have more secure beliefs about their own mental states than they can have about other things, such as the external world. I suppose, look, the intuition here is, well, I directly experience my own mental states, whereas any information I receive about the external world ultimately comes indirectly. It comes via the senses, where the senses, of course, are a type of mental state. So it seems like, well, surely I should have a kind of, better ground, a better understanding, a better access to my sensory data than I do to the external world. Moreover, nobody else can directly experience my mental states, so I have a special kind of authority in this case. Whereas I experience my own mind, other people can know my mind only via inference from my behavior. All of this supports this epistemic privilege thesis that introspection is a particularly reliable way of forming beliefs. Some philosophers have endorsed very strong versions of epistemic privilege, so it's sometimes been held that introspection of one's own mind is infallible. So if you form the belief that P on the basis of introspection, then it is impossible for P to be false. If I believe that I am in pain on the basis of introspecting my current mental states, then I must, in fact, be in pain. I can't be mistaken that I'm in pain. I may be mistaken about what's causing the pain. Maybe I believe that my leg has been stabbed when in fact no such thing has occurred, but I can't be mistaken that I'm feeling the pain. Similarly, it's sometimes been argued that beliefs formed on the basis of introspection are incorrigible, that is to say, they are incapable of being corrected by others. If I form the belief that I'm in pain on the basis of introspection, then nobody else can overrule my belief. Nobody else will have any grounds to claim that my belief is false. Nobody else has my experiences, so I get the final say, as it were, over what my experiences are. Notice that this doesn't entail infallibility. In principle, we might think that a person could hold a false belief, even though it would not be possible for anybody else to correct it. Finally, it's been argued that beliefs formed on the basis of introspection are indubitable. That is to say, those beliefs cannot coherently be doubted by the person who holds the belief. So if I form the belief that I am in pain on the basis of introspection, then it just wouldn't make sense for me to wonder whether it's really true that I'm in pain. I can wonder whether it's really true that my leg has been stabbed. I can wonder whether I'm hallucinating or dreaming, for instance, but I can't wonder whether I feel what I seem to be feeling. And again, this doesn't entail infallibility. Perhaps a belief can be false, even though it wouldn't make sense for a person to doubt it. But these are just some versions of the epistemic privilege thesis. As I say, these are very strong versions of the epistemic privilege thesis. The thought is, introspection is special. Our beliefs about our own minds are special in some way. Now, one thing that is worth saying is, well, epistemic privilege is anybody who endorses epistemic privilege will usually restrict it to a specific class of mental states. There's a consensus that epistemic privilege is going to be false for at least some mental states. Introspection cannot reveal everything about one's own mind. Many aspects of one's own mind may be hidden. For example, in a famous study by Richard Nisbett and Timothy Wilson, subjects were shown various pairs of stockings and asked which pair was the best quality. The majority of subjects picked the leftmost pair. Now, in fact, all of the stockings were identical. And it seems that the reason why the subjects preferred the leftmost pair was just a matter of the position. Apparently, people just had an attraction to things placed on the left, so this was a position effect. But when the subjects were asked if position played any role in their reasoning, in their preference, well, they all denied it. So what this suggests is that we have poor access to our cognitive processes, to our motivational states. When people try to introspect their motivations, they are likely to go quite badly wrong. And I mean, these days, I think this is something that most of us are comfortable with, right? We're comfortable with the idea that there is more to the mind than what is present in one's consciousness, and we shouldn't expect introspection to have any privilege with respect to this. So I may well be in the dark about my motivations, my personality traits, my skills, my reasoning processes, and so on. So the epistemic privilege thesis is usually restricted to one's immediate conscious experience. So yeah, sure, I may not know why I preferred the leftmost pair of stockings, but surely I can know, with very little room for doubt, that I prefer the leftmost pair of stockings. That is to say, that in this present moment, I feel a preference for those stockings over the other ones. Similarly, I may not know why I have become angry at my brother, but surely I can know, with very little room for doubt, that in this present moment I feel anger, right? So that's the sort of thing that the epistemic privilege thesis is supposed to hold for, the immediate, consciously experienced states. So Eric Schwitzgebel, in his book Perplexities of Consciousness, provides a series of arguments against the epistemic privilege thesis, even with respect to one's immediate conscious experience. Schwitzgebel argues that introspection is no more reliable than any other sources of knowledge. In fact, he sometimes seems to argue a bit more radically that introspection is outright untrustworthy. Introspection may well be less reliable than perception, even when it comes to immediate conscious experience. So we'll take a look at some of these skeptical challenges. So, I mean, first of all, let's consider the strong epistemic privilege claim. Is introspection infallible, incorrigible, indubitable? So it's maybe worth reflecting a little bit on some of the traditional skeptical scenarios and how they interact with beliefs formed on the basis of introspection. So Schwitzgebel gives the example of looking at a large, bright red object in the center of your visual field. Let's say it's a tomato, right? So as I look at the tomato, I judge that I have the experience of redness. Could this be mistaken? Well, presumably I could be mistaken about the meaning of the word. I mean, maybe I've forgotten exactly what the word red means, for instance. But then that's just to say that when I use the word red, I mean something different to its ordinary meaning. Here, the mistake is I'm applying the wrong label to an experience that is otherwise perfectly well known to me. So let's put aside this sort of case of just, using labels incorrectly. Assuming that I'm using the word in its ordinary sense, it's hard to see how I could be mistaken in my judgment that I have the experience of redness. I could be mistaken about what the world itself is like. So, maybe I think I'm looking at a tomato and actually there isn't a tomato in front of me. My experience is just a hallucination. But if I'm training my attention on what is apparently a tomato, what has this like reddish appearance, right? How could I be mistaken that there is the appearance of red? I mean, just try it, right? Go and look at a picture of a tomato. You can entertain the doubt that there is in fact a picture of a tomato in front of you. You might be hallucinating, but can you doubt that you are having a reddish experience right now? I mean, is that something you can doubt? A lot of people find that a bit less plausible. So there are skeptical scenarios which we can't rule out, which are consistent with the non-existence of the tomato. So take Descartes' evil demon, a godlike being that is intent on deceiving me, that induces various misleading experiences. The evil demon may be directly manipulating my mind to produce the sense impressions associated with tomatoes even though there is no tomato there. And so we can state this classic skeptical argument: if I don't know that I'm not deceived by an evil demon, I don't know that there is a tomato. I don't know that I'm not deceived by an evil demon, so I don't know that there is a tomato. The demon gives me sensory experiences that appear to be as if there is a tomato there, even though there's no tomato. And, so there you go. That's classic argument for skepticism of the external world. Is introspection of immediate conscious experiences immune from this kind of skepticism? Well, Descartes himself seemed to think so. When Descartes was sitting by his fire, he noted that given that he might be deceived by the evil demon, I quote, he says, "I can't say for sure that I now see the flames, hear the wood crackling, and feel the heat of the fire, but I certainly seem to see, to hear, and to be warmed." So there's the experiences of certain sensory qualities. That's all that all seems to be immune from the sorts of skepticism raised by the evil demon. Or is it? Well, as Schwitzgebel points out, if the evil demon hypothesis is true, presumably it could also be that you're not currently experiencing redness, even when you think you are currently experiencing redness. Presumably nothing stops the evil demon from inducing the judgment that I am experiencing redness, or that I am having a reddish phenomenology, while simultaneously suppressing the experience of red. No matter how strongly I feel like I'm experiencing redness, it could just be that the demon is inducing that judgment while suppressing the actual experience of red. The judgment that I am experiencing redness is not just identical to the experience of red itself. The judgment about the experience and the experience itself are separate things. I mean, they have different properties. The judgment is a propositional attitude. The red experience is a sensory phenomenal quality. So why shouldn't the demon induce one without the other? Indeed, Schwitzgebel suggests that some people may already experience this kind of thing. In dreams, we sometimes make judgments that are inconsistent with our experiences in just this kind of way. I may judge that I am looking at a red carpet even though the carpet does not appear red but appears blue. Or I may judge that Delia appears to be taller than John even though I can directly see that Delia is shorter. During the dream, these judgments seem totally natural. It's only after waking up and reflecting on the dream that I realize the incoherence. So, the suggestion is look, in dreams we sometimes make these sorts of judgments, right? I might well judge that I am experiencing redness while there just is no experience of red. Now, one response to this sort of case is to deny that these would be genuine judgments, genuine beliefs. So in this case, right, I'm saying to myself, I am experiencing redness, when in fact there is no experience of redness. Maybe the evil demon induces me to say that I'm experiencing redness, or maybe I say this in a dream, I dream that I say this, or something like that. So the thought is that in these contexts, I don't actually hold the genuine belief that I am experiencing redness. So maybe when a demon induces this sort of proposition in my mind, that's not a genuine belief. And maybe when I dream that I believe that I'm experiencing redness, that's not a genuine belief. Along the same lines, right, I might hypothesize that I believe that I'm experiencing redness. Clearly it doesn't follow that I actually believe that I'm experiencing redness. Or I might imagine that I believe that I'm experiencing redness. Clearly it doesn't follow that I actually believe that I'm experiencing redness. To imagine holding a belief is not a way of holding a belief. Perhaps to dream of holding a belief is not a way of holding a belief. We might find this sort of response plausible if we view beliefs in functionalist terms, defined in terms of the typical causal roles that they play. Mental states in dreams or mental states induced by evil demons don't play the appropriate causal roles to be beliefs. Arguably, however, this response only pushes the problem one step back. Let's grant that people do not hold genuine beliefs in dreams, and let's grant that anything that's induced directly by the evil demon could not be a genuine belief. But now we can ask, when I take myself to be believing that I am experiencing redness, how do I know that what is going on here is a genuine belief as opposed to the sort of quasi-belief that occurs in dreams? So, I mean, sure, the evil demon cannot induce the belief that I'm experiencing redness, but it can induce some other mental state such that I take myself to be believing that I'm experiencing redness, right? It can induce a quasi-belief. And it seems like that's all the skeptic really needs here, right? What the skeptic is driving at the end of the day is that the way things seem to be, the way I'm inclined to describe things, is not how things actually are. So I'm inclined to say that I'm experiencing redness right now, but that's not what's going on. That's not what I'm actually experiencing. So the evil demon induces me to quasi-believe the proposition I am experiencing redness, but this proposition is false. How do I rule out this scenario, right? How do I rule out that this is, how do I show that this is not what's going on right now? So in the standard skeptical scenario, the point is that there are alternative hypotheses that are compatible with our evidence, where the evidence is a matter of one's immediate experiences. So, given a set of visual experiences as of a tomato, it may be that I'm accurately perceiving a tomato in the external world, or it may be that there's some evil demon manipulating my senses to create the appearance of a tomato, or it may be a whole bunch of other things, right? The theory is underdetermined by evidence in that there are multiple theories compatible with the available evidence. This is the way that these skeptical scenarios are usually presented. But some of these skeptical scenarios cut deeper than this, because it's also the case that I can't rule out skeptical scenarios on which I am mistaken about what the evidence is in the first place. Declan Smithies, in his article on the unreliability of introspection, distinguishes two types of errors: brute errors and basing errors. A brute error is a false belief that is properly based on the evidence. So I hold the belief that there's a tomato in front of me on the basis of a visual experience of a tomato appearance. But in fact I'm hallucinating, right? So this is a brute error, right? We have a certain visual experience, and this constitutes evidence that is consistent with multiple theories. So although the evidence is consistent with the theory that there is in fact a tomato, it turns out that actually it's an evil demon creating a tomato appearance. By contrast, a basing error is a false belief that is not properly based on the evidence. So suppose, for instance, I hold the belief that there is a tomato in front of me because the evil demon has directly induced this belief in me, and in fact there is no accompanying visual experience. This is a basing error. In this case, there simply is no evidence, there's no beliefs that are formed in a way that is appropriately responsive to the evidence. So on many views of introspection, it may be that introspection of immediate conscious experience is immune from brute errors. I believe that I'm experiencing reddish phenomenology. Well, the justifying evidence here, if that belief is based on introspection at least, would just be the reddish phenomenology itself. The evidence that justifies the belief just is what makes the belief true. So assuming there is no brute error, there must be a reddish phenomenology, and my belief would be correct. So there would be no error, period. But this doesn't rule out the possibility of a basing error. I believe that I'm experiencing reddish phenomenology, but there just is no evidence that justifies the belief, period. This could, this remains possible. So with that in mind, we can extend the skeptical argument to introspection. If I don't know that I'm not deceived by an evil demon, I don't know that there is currently an experience of redness, I don't know that I'm not deceived by an evil demon, so I don't know that there is currently an experience of redness. But here's what I do know. I do know that if you sign up to my Patreon, you will be able to access a whole bunch of bonus videos. And of course, that will also contribute to keeping this channel going. Uh, you could also donate to the channel via PayPal if you want to just give a one-off donation. Also, I offer private tutoring in philosophy. I have a degree, master's, PhD in philosophy, and you can join the Discord. The links to all of this will be in the description. So, if nothing else, if you've got this far in the video, give it a like, leave a comment, do what you can to help promote it through the YouTube algorithm. Okay, then let's move on. So we just saw a skeptical argument concerning introspection, concerning beliefs about one's immediate conscious experience. Does this cover all introspective beliefs? Well, maybe not. Some introspective beliefs appear to be self-fulfilling because they are such that the judgment about the mental state and the mental state itself are not distinct. So consider Descartes' famous example, I am thinking. When I believe the proposition, I am thinking, this proposition is guaranteed to be true. By merely thinking this thought, I guarantee that I am in fact thinking. So in this case, the truth conditions of the thought are a subset of its existence conditions. So even an evil demon could not deceive me in such a way that this belief could turn out to be false. Once the thought exists, the thought is guaranteed to be true. So we might argue then, well, here we have like a class of introspective beliefs that are immune from skeptical doubt. There are two problems with this. So first of all, there are very few, if any, examples of these sorts of self-fulfilling propositions that are completely uncontroversial. So again, take the proposition, I am thinking. Descartes thought that he could be certain of this proposition, but as other philosophers like Bertrand Russell have argued, it might be possible that this proposition could be, that this thought could occur independently of a self. It's not at all obvious that I am thinking, right? Perhaps what Descartes should have said is not I am thinking, but merely there is thinking occurring. There need not be any I, any self that is the bearer of the thought. The existence of the thought need not imply the existence of a thinking thing. More recently, eliminative materialists like the Churchlands have cast doubt on the idea that any mental states actually instantiate thinking. They argue that there are no propositional attitudes such as thoughts. So what does that leave us with? Something is occurring, maybe. Second, even if this kind of proposition is immune from doubt, Schwitzgebel points out that this doesn't really have anything to do with introspection specifically. So consider the sentence, I am talking. If I utter this sentence, then this sentence is guaranteed to be true. The utterance is guaranteed to be true. The truth conditions of the utterance are a subset of its existence conditions. Its very existence makes it true. This has nothing to do with mental states, right? I say, like, when I utter the proposition I am talking, that's just an utterance. That's it's a sound, right? So it has nothing to do with introspection or mental states. The phenomenon of self-fulfilment is not special to beliefs formed on the basis of introspection. Beliefs formed in all sorts of ways can be self-fulfilling, and indeed there are many things other than beliefs, such as utterances, that can also be self-fulfilling. So the fact that there is this narrow class of beliefs formed by introspection that are self-fulfilling, well, that doesn't indicate that introspection is immune from skepticism in any special way. Okay then, so if all of this is right, then it seems that introspection is not immune from radical skepticism. Still, I mean, these sorts of radical skeptical hypotheses are not really of much concern to most people most of the time. And it would remain possible that introspection is still epistemically privileged in some sense, even if it's not immune from radical skepticism. It may well be that introspection is more reliable, is less prone to error, even if it's not perfectly reliable, even if it's not, never possible for it to be an error. So let's turn then to to a very different sort of argument. Schwitzgebel gives a number of examples designed to show that introspection is actually thoroughly untrustworthy. So I'm going to look at one of his examples. I think it's one of the most striking examples, and this is the case of the visual field, visual experience. So you can notice that your visual field has clarity in the center, while as you move into the periphery, it becomes increasingly indistinct. The question is, how broad is the field of clarity within your visual experience? Like, how much of your visual field presents itself as, clear and well defined? Most people tend to assume that there's a fairly broad range of clarity within their visual field. So at least to the sort of mid-periphery, right? Like, we have a fairly clear view of things, at least into the mid-periphery of the visual field. As I'm recording this video, I'm looking at the computer screen, and okay, so what can I see here? Well, it appears as if I see the whole screen in reasonably good detail. Beyond the screen, I see the keyboard with the keys and symbols, I see the computer mouse, I see a glass of water, and I can see various details on the glass. I can see some of the colours, the approximate water level, I can see, markings on it. Similarly, behind it, I can see the wall with markings on it, and so on. So I have this, and I'm looking right at the computer right now, but I still see all of this other stuff, and it's presented in reasonable detail. Now, the first thing to note is that in terms of the capacities of the human eye, we know that we can detect colour and shape with precision only within the central fovea, which corresponds to an area of the visual field about the size of the thumbnail at arm's length. And you can demonstrate to yourself just how poor your visual capacities are in the following way. Stare at a point in front of you, and while doing this, take a deck of cards and draw a card at random. Hold the card at arm's length outside your visual field, and then, making sure to remain staring at the same point and keep holding the card at arm's length, rotate your arm so that you bring the card towards the center of your visual field. And then ask yourself, well, at what point can you detect the color, the suit, the value of the card? At what point do those become distinct? And what you'll notice is that you have to bring the card surprisingly close to the center of your visual field before you can tell. It's worth actually doing this. I mean, I recommend pausing the video here and just doing the little task that I described, because it is quite striking. Yeah, I mean, you really do have to bring the card surprisingly close to the center of your visual field before it will become clear. Now, that tells us something about what we can actually detect with our eyes, but it doesn't really tell us anything about the nature of our visual experience, because visual experience is not determined simply by information received from the retina. Visual processing in the brain may well fill in the missing details by drawing on background knowledge plus our other senses. So, look, I'm looking at my computer screen right now. Maybe it's the case that I don't detect the exact shape of the glass of water that's to the left. But I have a great deal of experience of glasses in general, and of that glass in particular, so maybe my, brain draws on this to fill in the details that my retina doesn't capture. And so, as a result, I may well have a very rich, detailed visual phenomenology. So the question is, how could I tell? How do I know whether my visual field appears rich and detailed, or whether it appears sparse and blurry? Well, that's something that seems like it's going to require introspection, right? I need to turn my attention to the periphery of my visual field, and I ask myself, well, how does it appear? And again, it looks like I have to introspect. I have to figure it out for myself. So again, here's a little task for you. Stare at a single point in the distance, keeping your eyes fixed on that point, then just direct your attention to a part of the visual field that is away from the center. Direct your attention to the sort of mid-periphery, okay? How much detail do you find there? I mean, ultimately, you'll have to do this for yourself and see what you think. Now, what Schwitzgebel reports is that when he does this, he has the impression that his visual field is remarkably indistinct. So when he introspects carefully, he says that he comes to the conclusion that there's a tiny center of clarity which shifts rapidly over a very vague and indistinct background. So in my own case, right, again, I'm staring at a computer screen, and I know, as I said, there's a glass to my left. Now, initially, I was inclined to say, yeah, this glass appears in a great deal of detail. I see its shape, I see the colours of the picture on its side, I see the light glinting off it, I see the approximate level of the water in it, and so on. But do I? Well, when I'm careful to keep my eyes fixed on the computer screen, while directing my attention to the glass in the sort of mid-periphery, do I really detect all of that detail? Do I see that detail? It seems maybe not. I mean, maybe what I'm actually experiencing is like a kind of indistinct blob with no particular shape or colour. Maybe I'm not visually experiencing any of these details of the glass. Maybe I'm just inferring the details of the glass on the basis of my background knowledge. I mean, that's what Schwitzgebel would say is going on. Right? Schwitzgebel would say, well, what's really going on is it's not that the shape of the glass is part of my visual phenomenology. It's not that I'm seeing it, I'm inferring it, right? What I'm actually seeing is just this kind of indistinct blob. So that's that's Schwitzgebel's assessment, and it seems that at least some other people agree with Schwitzgebel's assessment here. Other people insist that no, they say no, visual experience really does present with a great amount of detail, even outside the center of the visual field. Now, even once we get into the mid-periphery, there is still, like, the shape of the glass is still part of the visual phenomenology. It's not merely inferred. As for my own judgment, I can say, well, I'm actually just not sure. I'm not sure whether I'm experiencing the shape or inferring the shape. Actually, I kind of feel like I can flip between them. So I feel like I can sort of make it so that there's a distinct shape or a kind of indistinct blob. I'm not really sure. And of course, that in itself is a rather striking result. I mean, like when I turn my attention to my visual field, it just isn't clear at all what I'm experiencing. So the point is that there is a debate, an interesting debate about the structure, the nature of visual phenomenology. Now, the key thing for the argument of this video, though, is that wherever the chips fall in this debate, it doesn't really matter for our purposes. Whichever group is right, the other group is seriously mistaken about prominent features of their immediate visual phenomenology. So we have two groups of people where both groups have attempted to introspect their visual experience carefully. They've introspected in good faith, in calm circumstances where they can pay close attention to experience. They've tried to get to the right answer, and yet introspection has led them astray. It's led at least one of these groups astray. And that would, and this is about, again, this is about our visual field, right? Like it's about a prominent feature of our visual field. So that would seem to suggest that introspection is really quite unreliable. So we can state the argument a bit more carefully. Let's say we accept that we need to accept the following claims, right? These are the underlying assumptions here. So, first, people who carefully introspect their visual experience come to hold different views about its properties. Right? Some people report that visual experience in the mid-periphery is clear and distinct. Others report that it is very indistinct. Second, these different views arise from normal introspective processes applied in the best possible conditions. There's nothing particularly unusual about the process of reflecting on one's visual experience. There's nothing special about visual experience that might lead us astray in that particular context, right? I mean, this is when we sort of ask this question of, well, is the experience of mid-peripheral vision clear or is it indistinct? That's a paradigmatic example of introspection, right? This is a normal case of introspective processes. Third, the disagreement about visual experience is a genuine disagreement. It's not a merely verbal dispute. It's not merely a matter of people defining terms differently. It's not that when one person says that they see shapes in the periphery of their visual field and another person says that they merely infer the shapes, that they're talking past each other. Now, of course, there is some vagueness here, right? When we use words like clear and indistinct and periphery and inference and so on, well, yeah, I mean, you can say, well, what exactly counts as clear, right? What exactly counts as the periphery versus the center? But, I mean, that kind of vagueness is just a feature of all predicates, right? I mean, pretty much all predicates are vague in some sense. And, I mean, we can make the task a bit more precise here, right? So I can say, well, look, how about this, right? Place a glass exactly 60 centimeters in front of you, place another object 10 centimeters to the left of the glass, look at the other object, and now ask yourself, do you experience the shape of the glass or is it an indistinct blob? And again, we're going to get different reports here, and it doesn't seem like you're going to plausibly explain that disagreement as just a matter of, oh, well, people are using words differently. Fourth, visual experience is, with respect to clarity in the mid-periphery, basically the same for everybody. So when one person says that their visual experience is clear and the other says that it is indistinct, in fact, in both cases, it's either clear or it isn't. So one person is making a mistake. And I mean, this seems plausible, I suppose. Like what psychological mechanism could lead to radical differences in visual experience? I mean, we don't tend to find such radical differences in other features of human beings. We all have basically the same bone structure, the same circulatory system, the same digestive system. With respect to vision, I mean, we have the same retinas, the same rods and cones, optic nerves. The visual systems of all ordinary people are very similar. So, the differences in reports are not going to be they're not going to reflect differences in the prominent features of visual experience itself. Fifth, a corollary of this previous point is that reflecting on visual experience does not significantly change its properties. So, it's not as if, okay, like, suppose I start off thinking that my peripheral visual experience is clear, then after careful reflection, I come to believe that it is indistinct. The process of reflection has not literally changed the experience itself from clear to indistinct. It's either clear or it's indistinct the whole time. Finally, the mistake, whichever side is making the mistake is large. It's not a mere detail, right? We are dealing with a prominent part of our visual field which we experience all the time, every day. This isn't a matter of something that, we're glimpsing in the corner of our eye. We're asking just like, what does the visual field present to us when we move beyond the center? If we're mistaken about this, it's a big mistake. So, what Schwitzgebel would suggest is that all of these claims are plausible, but if all of these claims are true, then introspection is not a reliable guide to the properties of immediate visual experience. Introspection can go badly wrong. And of course, this isn't a radical, skeptical scenario involving brains in vats or evil demons or anything like that. Ordinary introspection, even when it's applied in the best conditions, often leads people astray about their immediate visual experience. And if introspection is not reliable with respect to prominent features of immediate visual experience, it seems unlikely that there are going to be many contexts where it is reliable. So here we have an argument for the unreliability of introspection. Introspection is generally untrustworthy. So if this is right, why? Why does introspection go wrong here? Schwitzgebel suggests a few possibilities. So one point that he raises is that, well, consider that under normal circumstances, when you want to learn the properties of anything in your visual field, you move your eyes so that the object is in the center, where it can be seen in detail. So, like, I know that there's a glass on the table, and when I want to attend to the properties of the glass, ordinarily, I will just move my eyes and look directly at the glass. And then, when I move my eyes away from the glass, I still, like, I'm going to remember what those properties are. So it's like, you know, anything in my visual field that I want to see in with clarity and detail, I can do that. The clarity and detail are very easily, readily available. Like, okay, I'm looking at the computer, then I move my eyes, I look at the glass, I see it clearly, right? Then I move my eyes again, I look at the phone, I see it clearly. So this clarity and detail is always available, and it's always easily available by just shifting my eyes. And then what this gives me is the fact that this clarity and detail is readily available, plus the fact, of course, that I can so easily remember the details that I've seen just a moment ago, that gives me this false impression that like in any given moment, all of the objects that appear in my visual field, or most of the objects that appear, are well defined and that they're presented with clarity and detail. Second, it's quite common to analogize the visual field to a photograph or a movie scene. We sort of it's often it's common these days to sort of think of the visual field as being like a photograph, or we tend to think that like what's shown in a photograph can capture what is presented in visual experience. So a photograph shows what a particular scene looks like. It shows what would be shown in visual experience were you looking from the same location. Now, normally, photographs do not become indistinct when you move away from the center. The entire photograph will have clarity. So this analogy might, because we tend to draw this analogy between visual experience and photographs, we might well then overestimate the clarity of the visual field. Third, Schwitzgebel suggests that we have a tendency to project properties of the world onto our experience. So because the world itself is, it sort of is stable and it has precise boundaries and all of that, we assume that the same is true of our experience of those objects in the world, right? Like the glass has a specific shape, sharply defined borders, a clear arrangement of colours. So I assume that my visual experience of the glass has all of this as well. So there's another nice example that Schwitzgebel gives of eating a burrito. So he says, I know better what's in the burrito I'm eating than I know my gustatory experience as I eat it. I know it has cheese. In describing my experience, I resort to saying vaguely that the burrito tastes cheesy, without any very clear idea of what this involves. Maybe, in fact, I'm just or partly inferring the thing has cheese, so I must be having a taste experience of cheesiness. So, we start with what we know about the world, and then we kind of project that onto our experience. Fourth, other people can't see inside my mind. They can't make any direct assessment of what my immediate conscious experience is like. My judgments about my immediate conscious experience are very rarely corrected by others. But this process of correction usually plays an important role in the development of reliable capacities. I mean, imagine if you had to, learn how to shoot a gun at a target, but you could never check whether you've successfully hit the targets that you're trying to, learn how to shoot. So, we need to learn what it's like to go wrong. With respect to the visual field specifically, while our judgments about external objects are regularly subject to correction, it's only in very special and unusual circumstances, such as videos like this, that there's even any attempt to subject your judgments about your visual experience in itself to correction. And as a result, you can feel perfectly confident just going along with whatever description of your visual experience feels right to you, with very little risk that any better authority will come along and prove you wrong. If you want to think that your visual... So, in particular, it's easy to become sort of overconfident about just how much is presented with clarity in one's visual experience. You're never... Nobody's ever going to come along and show that actually it's far poorer than it seems to be. So these are just some reasons why introspection introspection might go wrong here. And maybe once we think about why it is that introspection might go wrong, that might then make it a bit more plausible to think that it indeed could be going wrong. But in any case, that's an argument for the untrustworthiness of introspection. I will leave it there. So thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.